the idea that gender is socially constructed and that based on like media and societal expectations, the ideas of gender are sort of like presented to us. And so we wanted to study how the media and traditions in place do contribute to gender construction, and specifically how media presented towards and directed towards children plays a factor in this. And so our research question is how are genders represented in popular children's media, and how does this differ in different networks' television shows? And what we were expecting to find is that gendered messages in the media push for stereotypical gender roles. And our theory, what we're basing this off, is that gender is a socially constructed idea. And that gender is fluid, and that media has kind of created these ideas of gender and then presented them to us, and so that's what's created so many gender expectations in our society. Media, as well as other things, we're just choosing specifically to look at media, and more specifically television. So we believe this is important because gender really is a fluid concept, and so we're just trying to study how gender is being pushed on kids, and how we can't really study gender effects, but how these ideas of gender have created stereotypes among the genders, and like we've all seen it, like females are expected to be one thing and males are expected to be another, and so we're looking at that in children's media. So some theory that this is based off is the cultural studies theory, which basically shows that media affects how individuals develop an understanding of the social world. So this relates to our study because children see expectations of genders in the media, and then this affects like how they see genders in their own lives and what is expected of them based on their sex and how they will apply this to their gender. Another theory that applies to our research is the social cognition theory, which kind of shows that people learn by watching others. So when children see these gender expectations in the media, they create those expectations in themselves. And other academics have studied this topic in a way, and they've studied a lot of shows and a lot of different types of media and found that this media does have a negative impact on children watching, and it does have a negative impact on what they believe gender is and what is expected of them based on their gender. There's also studies that have shown that media that doesn't have so many gender expectations and that shows a more fluid idea of gender has a super positive influence on media. And these studies studied a lot of different types of media, not just television, and
Right, and another study showed that media can definitely influence personal identity in all of its viewers, but specifically in children as well. And those gendered messages are just to male and female, or like the traditional sexual orientation. And what a few of these studies focused on is that how culture is still so very strong and very influential in media, that although they try to conform to the trends, the current trends and the current culture, it's still a little hard for media to change their views and their representation of gender.
Some other studies shows that the media have big impact on the kids' behavior. This is more toward the behavior. According to the studies of the past 10 years, and in fact they're more the violent behavior, and then like more affect them to alcohol, tobacco, and sexual activity. And in this relation to our study is that not just affect the children how they think and also how they behave in these children's shows and how they form the gender identity.
All right, and for our research, we wanted to watch as many shows as we possibly can, but without it being too sporadic or too all over the place. So we compared 3 main TV channels, and and those are the most popular and most accessed channels in cable. And we chose 10 episodes each, but we have 2 shows per channel. So that's about 30 hours of observation, about 50 episodes altogether. And then we also chose the most popular shows for each of those channels. So we have PBS, Disney, and Nickelodeon for channels. We chose PBS mainly because it's more public, it's more educational. This is what a lot of parents will show their kids. And for Disney Channel, because of their reputation, they're one of the world's most largest media companies. And Nickelodeon, because it's a bit more commercial, it's geared towards children and teenagers. And then all these shows are the most popular shows from all of those different channels. All right, and then once we were able to watch those, we actually put together a list of different gendered messages that we noticed and put them in categories of personality, behavior, interests, and physical appearance. And then we noticed that most of them are still very traditional. The gender messages of boys and girls are still the same throughout all of them. That boys are a bit more funny, they do dumb actions, they're into sports, reading, they're messy, and girls are very emotional, they're fashionable, they know everything, or they're bossy and they worry.
Yeah, and there's so many different messages like appear in both boys and girls, and so this is how we decided to categorize them into like 5 categories for each gender. So just a little explanation, like wild is like including like they being funny, they like to do dumb things, and then doers is like they like to take action for whenever there's something happens, and in group they also like they would get commanded to do things and by girls, and they would like start doing things. Optimistic, they're more encouraging and have positive attitudes, and why body language is like they will always do like things like this or like that. And conservative is like more like related to like girls being quiet, they're sweet and kind, and then thinker, like they like to analyze stuff or explaining in shows, and they just like kind of mentioned earlier in the group, they would give commands to the guys to do things. And pessimistic is they more get worried easily, like they get stressed out in a many situation, at least showing the shows. And in close body language, they cross their arms a lot and then put their arms down. And then this is kind of like what we find like happens a lot. It's like being wild and wide body language, and those are other things that appear more. And this is like individuals. We can find like PBS have like higher specific gender messages, and then Disney is kind of like in the middle in comparison to other 2 shows. And Nickelodeon is kind of, they don't show us specific messages compared to other shows. So our analysis is that we think that PBS, as they show that much of the gender messages, they have the distinct differences between the 2 genders and in their behavior, and then just kind of encourage the bosses. Boys always causing trouble, and they always trying to be funny, doing goofy stuff, and then the girls, they always bring commands and keep the boys on track. And the Nickelodeon have like less attention to gender stereotype and a more natural representation of gender roles in society. And Disney, a big gap of gender interest, behavior showed differently, perceived differently between sexes, and a big gap in appearance expectations.
Yeah, so we definitely found that the stereotypes hold up. We found that in a lot of ways, just exactly what you would expect, like boys being seen as dumb and like girls being seen as sort of know-it-alls. And something that we really noticed is that a lot of times for like the exact same trait, the genders would be portrayed completely differently. Like for example, like London Tipton in Sweet Life of Zack and Cody is seen as like very ditzy and like just dumb. And then like sort of Max in Wizards of Waverly Place, who has like a similar personality, is seen as funny. So in a lot of ways, with a lot of the different traits where the genders might have the same trait, the way it's portrayed is completely different. And so we saw a lot of that, and just like huge differences in like appearances between the genders, like at least specifically with Disney, like boys are seen a little more like raggedy and not caring about their appearance, and girls are shown a certain way, and like expectations with like girls with long hair and different things, which were very specific to the genders. And like with Nickelodeon, so like PBS was very traditional. Like what we found more specifically that they were traditional in was like with the parents having traditional family roles, and like the father being like the moneymaker and with a job, and like the mom staying home and doing dishes. So we found traditional roles in that way. And then Disney and Nickelodeon were more just like with gender expectations on boys and girls. We definitely had a lot of limits of research. It was super hard to define gendered messages and specifically to find those in the shows. And we also only studied one type of media. We just did television, which kids would be exposed to. So we're trying to sort of connect kids shows to like gender construction and how kids will view their own gender by watching this media. And then also we can't like exactly determine that media directly affects gender construction. It's not something we can really study, and so that's a huge limit. We're not exactly sure that it has a direct effect on how kids view their own gender. So in conclusion, we found that the genders are represented in very stereotypical ways. And kind of what I said before, the genders are seen very differently, and like for specific traits, they'll be seen negatively in one gender and positively in another gender, and so that was shown a lot. We also saw that like personalities were such a big part of gender. Like personality types were specific to certain genders, and it wasn't just anyone can have any personality type. It was very specific to the genders. And between the three different channels that we were comparing, we found that PBS was the most traditional, and Nickelodeon was like slightly more crude and like more objective towards women. And so it like showed, so they all showed different aspects of like gender stereotypes. Like Nickelodeon was more like crude humor, PBS was more traditional, and Disney was just kind of in between the two. Do you guys have